Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brock Beard from NASCAR.info coming at you after the conclusion of the Straight Talk Wireless 400 at Homestead, where unofficially, pending the results of post-race inspection, Kyle Larson has scored 2 of the 3 wins he was entered into this weekend, winning the Truck Series race and following it up with a win in the Cup Series race, beating his teammate Alex Bowman, who made a costly mistake off of turn 4 in what was a very tight battle for the lead there as Larson was gaining ground on him towards the end of the race. Great battle there at the end. Very solid racing all weekend. Homestead always puts on fantastic shows that are more than deserving of being a championship race there again. And it's just, it's unfortunate that things are the way they are. But again, I think probably one way to look at it positively right now is having this race so soon after we had it last fall. Seems like it was just yesterday. We were talking about the great pass that Tyler Reddick made in the final corner around Ryan Blaney. Blaney, of course, had his own share of very bad luck this time around, almost in last place there after a catastrophic engine failure. They were mentioning in the broadcast, first time he's had 3 consecutive DNFs in the first part of the year here. So that was definitely an unusual turn of events for a driver that had so dominated the race here. We'll talk about the action from today's race, as well as the Truck Series and Xfinity Series. I got some more updates on the Cartoon Network Wacky Racing video, which is still in the works here as well. We'll do some trivia here later in the show, so hope you guys enjoy here. But again, Kyle Larson pulling off the victory, unofficial margin of victory, 1.205 seconds there between the 2 Hendrick teammates. Bubba Wallace with a fine run in third, best run he's had at Homestead, and he felt very positive about that in his post-race interview there as well. Gorgeous paint scheme. I like that Miami has kind of taken on this whole deal here with some of these other races where they really kind of take on elements of the region. A lot of teams running these kind of Miami Vice pastel colored paint schemes. We saw a good amount of that all 3 of the races this weekend here, but Bubba's was certainly one of those. Him coming back about 5 seconds back there, almost 6 seconds back, but still in the 3rd spot. Chase Briscoe, good to see a big turnaround for him, finishing in the 4th spot after what's been a really rough start to the year, despite the pole at the Daytona 500. Thinking about the loose wheel last week, the accident at Phoenix, him getting a good run out here at a track where, again, he's not usually believed to be that consistent there at the front of the field. Good to see there as well. Denny Hamlin seemed to have the second best car all day. Was right there with Kyle Larson in the thick of it, had some great battles up front, side by side up there. Really enjoyed seeing them being able to duke it out there on a very challenging track where you have multiple different grooves out there. Still comes back with a 5th place finish. Chris Buescher worked his way into the top 10 and 6th. AJ Allmendinger getting a good amount of recognition in this race as well, which was nice to see. Mentioning his performances with this car at the track. I don't usually think of AJ being that consistent up there at the front of the field at this track here. Of course, his road course performances, especially at the Charlotte Roval, become much more of a story. But again, a respectable 7th place finish out there, especially in a year where the Kaulig Racing team really seems to be struggling. We'll talk about that also in the Xfinity Series portion of the show here this evening. Tyler Reddick, Ryan Preece, and Justin Haley rounding out the top 10. Haley, the top Spire Motorsports entry there in the field there, just ahead of Zane Smith, who drove the 71 car last year, but finishing ahead of him this time around, Zane Smith in the 11th spot. Joey Logano, kind of surprised to see him in the 14th spot, given all the problems he had in this particular race here. Multiple incidents on pit road, including a spin with Josh Berry there that very nearly could have been a serious incident. Thankfully, the crew members were very alert and getting out of the way of a situation there. Mentioning on social media back in 2001, there was an altercation. I believe it was between Ward Burton and Ricky Rudd at the front end of pit road there that ultimately led to a lot of these crew members wearing helmets and more protective gear than they had to that point. Of course, pit road being much more hazardous even before then, but that was really one of the latest developments in what we usually see with the crew members these days. But that being another story there at the same time. But Logano, fine recovery in 14th. I really didn't expect him to be up there, especially with the multiple pit stops he was making there along the way. But Kyle Larson attempting to go for the triple header here this weekend, competing in all 3 of the series where, again, as I said before, I don't think it's that sportsmanlike to be able to compete in there all these 3 series, especially if you're a driver of Larson's caliber, where you're a shoe-in for the playoffs each year. you're a past series champion, and you're arguably the best driver in the circuit, or at least one of them. You're definitely in the conversation to be that way. And competing in all these races really just kind of show, especially at this track. I mean, it's this track, he is so ludicrously good here. And just think of all the things that had to happen. We'll have to hop around here a little bit between the three races because, of course, he was part of all of them there. The Truck Series race, especially after seeing what Kyle Busch did at Atlanta, where he was more or less toying with the field there and was able to pull off the victory over Stuart Friesen. In this case here, Larson spun out with about 40 laps to go, marched through the field, just blasted through everybody else there, and was able to pull off the win with time to spare. A tremendous rally, but even then, it probably wouldn't have happened if Corey Heim didn't have a stumble in his engine in the Truck Series race there. He was fighting him pretty well. It would have been interesting to see what could have happened there if Heim would have been able to hold him off or not. But it still seemed like Larson was, had the lucky horseshoe in his back pocket, and that being, of course, is a much more experience and access to equipment and everything else that's an advantage over some of these other programs out there. And then in the Xfinity race yesterday, was just absolutely waxing the field, leading by 16 seconds thereabouts in the late race caution, came out with a spin off of turn 4, has a late race pit stop. He's so far ahead of everybody else still that he easily gets off pit road, even with a pretty conservative pit stop at the end. But Sam Mayer getting in the back of him, lifting the rear tires off the ground on the restart was enough to kind of let a couple of other drivers up there. Austin Hill almost thought he jumped the restart at that point, made things as crazy as they were at the finish, and ultimately Larson did not pull off that win. And again, very easily could have pulled the season sweep. A little disappointed to hear that he's going to be doing this again at Bristol. Again, I get it at one point because these drivers want to compete everywhere. They want to run as many races as they can. They want to compete wherever they can. They want to challenge themselves. Well, that's kind of the issue I have, is like, how much of a challenge is it really? Again, how much attrition, happened in the Truck Series race, still won that. Xfinity Series race, I still thought if he got to third place on the last lap of that Xfinity Series race, he probably was going to have a shot at least bailing it into turns 3 and 4 and maybe making a move to go for the win, especially after what we saw with Reddick in the Cup Series race last year. Just didn't quite work out, was still saddled back there, and that turned out to be the way it did. It's fun in one sense because I get it. You have kind of the same emotions that you had from Christopher Bell last week trying to go for his 4th straight Cup win. But again, I think these drivers are at their best when they just focus on the Cup Series, that they let the Xfinity Series and Truck Series be development programs. And really, even just one time a year, like, do we really need to have, races where a driver is like this much better? I think we could all pretty much conclude that, if everything's going right and there's not any problems at all outside of his control, that he could very easily pull the season sweep on any of these weekends. But especially at one of his best tracks, too. I mean, that's the other thing, too. If you're going to do a season sweep of a weekend there, at least do it at maybe one of your worst tracks. Whatever that would be for Kyle Larson, I don't even know. Well, probably a super speedway, actually, in that case. And just see if that could work out that way. I don't know. It's a whole crazy situation there, too. But I get people being excited about it. The Truck Series race, I think, was probably the best race of the weekend in terms of the competition in there. I still think he shouldn't have been in there. I think he would have had a perfectly adequate race between Lane Riggs and Corey Heim's stumbling engine there at the same time. That would have been a good enough finish. I can only remember back to when Sheldon Creed was about to win Darlington a couple of years ago, and you had him and Noah Gragson, and they were getting into it, and then Kyle Larson comes out of nowhere, puts one of them in the wall and ends up being a factor in the finish there. It's not necessary. Do we need, we don't need that third car to be a Cup Series regular. It just messes everything up. So, I don't know. But whatever it was definitely not a factor in him being able to pull off the win today. So again, congratulations to Larson on pulling off what's surprisingly only his second Cup win at Homestead. But again, he's always so consistently up there. And has, whatever happened in these races that happens, late race cautions, and issues on pit road. And we did indeed see that too. Some damage on the left side of Larson's car there too, added some extra complexity to this one. It really seemed like the air could get into that rocker panel there on the left side of his car, and it was not a small bit of damage there. It actually punctured that pretty good, but it, if anything else, it just made the car maybe just a little bit slower, but it's really hard to say because he got around Bowman with time to go. So, you know, a little bit of everything to kind of figure out there at the same time. But again, you know, Cup drivers winning Cup races, especially under tight circumstances there, that's what they're supposed to be doing. And by goodness, he definitely did that. Looking at the last place battle, this was kind of the thing that's thrown me off here for sure. I had picked Carson Hocevar to pull off the wins, which is probably the kiss of death there for the number 77 Spire team. Hocevar ends up blowing an engine in the last 100 laps there. However, he had some really interesting strategy. Strategy was actually really enjoyable in this one. I think it's just because of the track lends itself to long green flag runs. You usually have very, very low attrition. In fact, Hocevar, completing about 184 laps, I believe, is still only about the 7th or 8th most laps completed by a last place finisher. So very, very low attrition out there, multiple grooves that people can run, and multiple strategies. And sometimes at some tracks, especially on the road courses, I've always found the strategy is kind of hard to follow. But even this one here, with a Fox broadcast and so forth, I thought they did a pretty commendable job of that. I thought it was pretty easy to follow what was going on. You had enough people that were splitting these stages in half, and you had some that maybe were short pitting a bit. And Hocevar's, I think, was the most interesting. I really thought he was having a mechanical issue or something, and I was surprised that there was very little radio traffic when I switched to his channel, and it showed him towards the end of, I believe, stage 1, and he was about 5 or 6 seconds back in the pack, and he just kept losing ground. It's like, my God, he's going to get lapped before the end of the stage. It's like, did he drop a cylinder? Did something else happen there? And it turns out, no, it was intentional. That they changed tires under the caution that came before that towards the end of stage 1, comes back out there and actually runs minimum speed, just as, you know, as slow as he could to not wear the goodie off the tires. He ends up staying out. Everybody else pits, and you think, oh no, you know, you think back to, get these flashbacks to Daniel Suarez and what was it, Cole Witt, when he was out in front of him there, the Xfinity Series Championship race and so forth, or I guess Elliott Sadler was on the negative end of that. However that worked out, and it really didn't happen. And we saw really what the margin is. Now, maybe so much of this is, you know, tire with the Cup Series versus the other series. But it was interesting to see. Hocevar actually stay up there and run about 6th or 7th, kind of settle back. He lost a couple spots, which, you know, is expected. Of course, the top teams with the freshest tires, they're going to be the fastest cars. But he definitely didn't drop back to like 20th or 25th where he was running before then. Held on to about 7th or 8th, was still around that spot. He dropped to about 11th or 12th towards the end of the race there, but unfortunately, engine started laying down. He ended up going to the garage area in a short afternoon for him there too. So rough deal for him. I expected him to be a contender up there. He seemed really loose going into this race with his interview with Ross Chastain in Friday's Truck Series race, which was pretty funny. Chastain saying, like, I'm glad you have a microphone and not a steering wheel in your hand here. Of course, the no love lost between those two drivers on the circuit. And then you have Kyle Busch talking about him on Kevin Harvick's podcast this week. And then to cap things off, this wonderful GTA parody that got posted on NASCAR's social media account today. If you haven't seen it, definitely recommend it. A lot of fun that they had going around Miami. I was wondering why Hocevar was wearing the Hawaiian shirt there during his Truck Series broadcasting deal the other day, and this definitely reveals the other part of it there. So I really thought it seemed like the stars were aligning, especially after Josh Berry's win last week. Unfortunately, that didn't turn out to be the case, and of course he ends up with what is now unofficially his 4th career last place finish in the Cup Series in that number 77 there. So a short afternoon for him, and then moments later, Ryan Blaney dominating this race. I'm sure, much like Christopher Bell in Las Vegas last week, Blaney had this race circled on his calendar this year after that heartbreaking loss where he just left just enough room for Tyler Reddick to just blast around him in turns 3 and 4 and take that win in the penultimate race of the championship last year, or the next to last. Of course, he had Martinsville after that, so the second to last before the championship race there. And Reddick punched his ticket. Blaney, of course, winning Martinsville the next week. I'm sure he was determined to get out there and really put together a great run, in spite of the fact that the Hendrick teams seem to really have this nailed down, with Bowman's pole and Larson being Larson, obviously. But Blaney, unfortunately, loses an engine in spectacular fashion. Yes, he had that happen in another race earlier this year, but this one even more spectacular, just seeing the amount of smoke that was pouring into the grandstands there. And I'm sure incidentally fumigating the bees out of the grandstands that we saw in part of the Xfinity Series race yesterday. But Blaney ends up with a 36th place finish. Not in last place, though, but is he in position to potentially defend his spot there going for the NASCAR championship? As we saw last year, we had the NASCAR title and going for the Cup Series championship. It seems like it's a difficult start to the year for them. And this particular issue for the Ford teams and the Roush Yates engines, very surprising. I don't know if it kind of reminiscent of what Bobby Labonte was going through in the earlier part of 2001 in the Joe Gibbs engine department, and just completely at a loss after having such a good year the year before. So we'll see what the story is there too. J.J. Yaley and Cody Ware were your competitors for the last place battle before all this happened. Yaley had lost a couple of laps, but was within striking distance of Ware. They both ended up on the same lap. And big thanks to everybody that was sharing pictures for this weekend. We have a number of people to thank for that as well. The John D. Rockefeller account here on social media provided some great pictures there from the garage area. He was in the infield this weekend. David Pequeen, always covering a lot of races at Homestead, sent some great pictures, and I shared those on there. And Steven Stump as well, doing some great coverage in the garage area on the media beat this weekend. So big thanks to all three of them as well, providing some great pictures. So we have those shared in the Truck Series and Xfinity articles, and I got some more stuff for the Cup article today, again, pending the results of post-race inspection. So big thanks to all of them. If you want to follow their accounts, I've retweeted their posts on the social media account there as well, and listed them for the articles. So we'll have that there at the same time. But Cody Ware and J.J. Yaley battling among the bottom five contenders there. Ultimately, Yaley dropping about a lap behind Ware, finishes the race 2 laps behind Ware, the checkered flag. But the 44 car, most importantly, finishing the race under power. Yaley had already finished last at Homestead twice in his career, including last fall, when I believe he was the only DNF, if not one of the only DNFs in that race. Good to see a bit of improvement there for an underfunded team, really trying to maximize what they can do with that 44 car. And it was my understanding, I believe Colby Evans was bringing up that this is the same car that wrecked so hard at Atlanta. They had a very savage wreck out there on the front stretch. Good to see, of course, Yaley okay. And then this car also pieced back together in relatively short order. That wasn't really that long ago there. So good effort there for the 44. And another nice paint scheme. I like the reflective numbers on that car there, too. Very reminiscent of what we saw with some of these other teams like Bubba Wallace and so forth. Riley Herbst rounds out the bottom 5. Looking at other drivers towards the back, a rough day for Team Trackhouse. Shane Van Gisbergen never really got a good handle on this race. He was towards the back right from the start. Dropped to last place briefly after there was a bit of a scramble. Very easily could have had another early race incident like we saw in Trucks and Xfinity earlier this weekend. We had the altercation, the Truck Series race with Gio Ruggiero, and the incident with Ben Rhodes in turns 1 and 2. In the Xfinity Series race, we had a bit of a stack up on the initial start where Carson Quapple had to jump out of line. We could have very easily had an accident right there at the start. And ultimately, 16 laps into the race, you had Christian Eckes losing an engine there. First last place run for him in his early Xfinity Series career. And then in the Cup Series race, in turns 3 and 4, Cole Custer gets bumped sideways by Denny Hamlin right in the middle of the pack, like about 15th to 18th place. It just plummets through the field. The field did a great job getting around that. In fact, Yaley had dove all the way to the apron in what looked to be about a 4-wide battle. We saw it briefly on camera during the FS1 broadcast, but they cut away just moments later there. But Yaley was able to get around Cody Ware and kind of began that battle at the back there. But Cole Custer ends up finishing a lap down in the 28th spot. Still not a great run there for the Haas Factory team, at least on the Cup side, whereas their Xfinity program seems to have not missed a step at all from last year. But that's another story there, too. Very surprised to see Christopher Bell struggling as much as he did in this race, given the fact that he's a past winner at Homestead. And it just seems like those 3 consecutive wins now suddenly feel very far away, which is very strange. Was not really much of a factor in Las Vegas, and then comes into this event here, spins off of turn 4, and whatever the problem was, just really wasn't able to recover from it. I don't know how much damage was done to the under tray or the diffuser or whatever else underneath the car, but really wasn't able to get back up there, finishing in the 29th spot. had multiple stops along the way. Understand that Eric Jones had an issue with his under tray, and they had to make some repairs to that, getting him back out there. Jones finishing a bit further up the order here. Actually a 15th place finish right behind Logano, so a fine turnaround for him. A couple other drivers that I was really kind of hoping would have some great runs in this one. John Hunter Nemechek really backed up his top 10 qualifying run from that 23-11 race he drove in place of Bubba Wallace after the Las Vegas deal. Nemechek gets a 23rd place finish here today, so not a great run. Definitely on the lower end. He's been hanging on still in the top 16 in points. I don't know if this would keep him in there or not. I think this might actually drop him back out. Let's look at the unofficial points here on the J-Ski page. And indeed, I do not see him on there now. He's now dropped to 18th place, actually now in a three-way tie for the 16th spot there in points. Currently, Ryan Preece has the tiebreaker right now in the 16th spot. Kyle Busch and John Hunter Nemechek now tied with 130 points each in the playoffs here so far. So very interesting to see how that shakes out. Michael McDowell also on the verge of falling out of the top 16. He's now tumbled to the 15th spot in points there, but still hanging on there, flying the flag for the Spire effort. Also, AJ Allmendinger's effort has brought him back into the conversation. It's showing him in the 20th spot in points, so a fine turnaround there for him as well. But we'll see what the situation is there too. But regardless, Kyle Larson punches his ticket into the playoffs, as we have to talk about here. And Larson now third ranked here in the points, in the overall structure, rather. Now, they're not the raw points themselves. He having 208 points there, right behind William Byron's 244. But regardless, now advances to the next round of whatever his season is going to be the rest of this year. Again, at one of his best tracks. Let's see. Chase Briscoe, seeing him in the top 16. I think he was. I'm checking out my own lineup here. I guess he was already in the top 16. I know he's really been struggling. Maybe not. I don't think he was in the top 16. I don't see it out there. So again, a good turnaround there for the number 19 team, and perhaps the start of something much better than what he's been struggling with over at the Stewart-Haas team before they shut down. Let's see. I'll go back to the Cup Series results here as well. William Byron, not really much of a factor in this. Again, never past winner. Had some moments there. Looked like he was maybe going to start kind of joining the conversation. Didn't quite work out there, finishing in the 12th spot there. Noah Gragson was the other driver. Talking about drivers that really expected to have a good run. Gragson was so impressive in Las Vegas. When I picked Hocevar to win this, I was really worried about not picking Gragson. I'm thinking I shouldn't have left that on the table. Indeed, he ends up qualifying top 5. He almost got the pole position there. Would have been a tremendous effort for him there, but regardless, best run of the season he's had. Vegas, I thought I kept seeing him during that broadcast, and I kept thinking, I wasn't really watching Josh Berry at all during last week until he finally got up there in the battle with Suarez. I thought really it was going to look like a Noah Gragson win. Him winning in Las Vegas, his home track, was going to be huge. Unfortunately, got involved in that incident on the back straightaway, tore up the right front fender, got in a second incident later in the race that knocked him out. This race here, just an issue with pace or pit stops or whatever was going on there. Ends up back in the 16th spot, though, but still a solid run. Again, Front Row Motorsports effort, kind of the higher of the middle tier there, trying to kind of make the jump. They closed a lot of ground with McDowell, especially with the next-gen car. Seemed like he really took to that car on the road courses and helped develop that program. And now this first year with McDowell moved on to Spire. I think Gragson is definitely one to watch, at least as a dark horse here in this stretch. I would even go as far to say that he's probably the next one you really have to look at in terms of being a first-time winner down the stretch, now that Barry's pulled off his on that. Gragson, of course, it's so easy to forget. Something that feels so long ago, just thinking about his success in the Xfinity Series, and of course, his also mixed results at Homestead. You think about the altercation he had with David Starr a few years ago when he was battling for the lead. That could be something else to look at there too. But I don't know how well Gregson's going to do at Martinsville. Of course, he's won Xfinity race there at Martinsville, but hopefully things shake out for him, and we'll see what the story is. Incidentally, I like the paint scheme too. I know he ran the Beefaroo paint job there last year on the number 10, but it looks pretty good there on the 4, I gotta say. McDowell back in 20th there. That's him hanging on to the points. John Hunter Nemechek. Josh Berry there, the Vegas winner, finishing in the 17th spot, leading 2 laps, but not really being a factor there in the finish. But again, off to a fine start this year, and definitely with the results from last week, I could certainly not argue with that. Kind of a crazy weekend in general. Obviously, everything started this weekend with the word of the fires outside the racetrack there. And it was hard to tell from online exactly how close it was to the track until they actually started showing it. And you got actually helicopters scooping water out of the aquifer just outside of turn 3. You got smoke and flames visible from the infield. And regardless, all this weekend, NASCAR did not change the schedule. Everything went forward on it, even when there was only about 30 or 40% containment on Friday. So kudos to the fire crews and the staff that were involved in that tremendous effort there. I'm glad that the Fox broadcast brought attention to that, both through the ceremony they did in the pre-race where they had them driving around the track, and also showing just the area that was devastated. I mean, hopefully it didn't look like it was an area with homes. I know it's a lot of wetlands and swamps and so forth in that area, but it did look like a massive area that was involved in that area. So again, kudos to the crews out there. There's tremendous effort out there. And, obviously this race going forward is not the most important thing. But it was tremendous just, how close it got and how it was never really a threat because they were just clamping down on that. So I thought that was, just incredible. Looking through this weekend's race here as well, we'll go into the Xfinity and the Truck Series race. And, of course, move right along on that. Let's move it back to the Xfinity Series race here, too. And, of course, the first bit of controversy about this particular race here, having this race broadcast remotely. If you didn't tell me that this race was broadcast remotely, I feel like I still would have sensed that something was a little bit off. And you can kind of see it from, all the members of the booth. You have the same group that's up there, and it just seemed like they were just starting to kind of miss stuff that was happening. Like, an incident would happen that would be a car spinning off turn 4, wouldn't be sure what was going on in that case. Or a replay that maybe didn't have the best view of it. It really seemed like, not having that access to be able to see what's happening on the racetrack really did affect that broadcast. I wouldn't say it was necessarily a bad one because I still think the talent that was involved carried it through pretty well. I felt like the group did a pretty good job. But it wasn't quite up to that exact same level. And I don't see what was really advanced by having the digital studio and the person back at the studio with the big screen in the background and all that. It didn't really help. And I understand the frustration that a lot of people were saying. It's like, okay, well, if you had to do something remotely, why did you have it be something in Florida when you have like a Florida-based or Charlotte-based, series versus doing the ones out on the West Coast? How could you afford to be out there and not here? I mean, it's really unfortunate because the CW, when everything's on all cylinders and you got the crew at the track, they've made a lot of really, really good advancements. But falling into a lot of the silly stuff that is becoming a problem for the other networks, it's really holding them back. And it really did feel that way. And it was unfortunate because it was a really, good Xfinity Series race, in spite of Larson's dominance of so much of it. But it really, there were just little moments. It wasn't really big moments, but it's the death of 1,000 little cuts. It was the same situation that we see with Fox so often there, where just something isn't a good view, and they just kind of move on and don't talk about it, or something happens that should be very clearly right in front of them, and they don't know what brought out the caution, or they don't know what caused the damage in this case, or something. I wish I wrote down examples of it, but I know it was feeling that during it there, and which is really too bad because it was just little bits. It was nothing really massive, but it was just enough that became a distraction, and that's the worst thing that broadcast can be. It can't take away from the experience. At least get it to that neutral level where it doesn't add or remove anything from it. Which is kind of like what I felt like today's broadcast was, actually. I thought for the Cup group, they did more or less a pretty solid job on that there, too. And again, tracked the strategy well, tracked some of the other storylines pretty well. Some things, there could always, it wasn't perfect, but it was definitely a step in the right direction, really. I felt like it was more cohesive this time around. And maybe it was the flaws of the Xfinity one that kind of brought that more into focus. But this is all peripheral to the actual story itself. Justin Allgaier pulling off a surprising win. A driver that so often has had situations where wins just get snatched away from him, late race cautions, blown tires, or just whatever misfortune, or just, or in this case here, this one looking like he's not even going to be a factor because Kyle Larson's leading 132 of the 201 laps, just ridiculous degrees, just lapping almost up to the top 5. Just an utterly dominant performance that Larson was putting. He needs to get a cup ride one day. They were talking about it. It's like, yeah, it's absurd. But the rest of the field just struggling to catch up. Larson ends up having the late race restart, and as mentioned, the Sam Mayer contact there ended up being decisive. I really felt, and I said on social media, it's like, look, you could swap out that car for a wheelbarrow, and the result of this race is not going to change. I really felt like Larson was going to get a good enough start. I don't know why he was taking so long in the restart box there to get run over by Mayer, or if Mayer just really jumped the gun and was just way too far ahead of it. It was just a perfect disaster there. And it's pretty amazing that he didn't just get wrecked right at the front of the field there. Larson did a great job. He wasn't just hit once. It looked like he was getting hit multiple times going into the first corner, and was just on the verge of control. But did a great job, still held on and got a 4th place run, but obviously not happy about Mayer and the contact at the end of the race there, and did avoid what would have been a triple header weekend for whatever that's worth there, compared to what Kyle Busch did at Bristol a couple times in years past too. But Justin Allgaier pulls off the win. Sam Mayer in second, Austin Hill in third. Again, I've really started to kind of come around on Austin Hill a little bit, and I don't know if something's just changed with him, or if he's just maturing a little bit more as a race car driver. Between the incident that he had a while back and the one at Phoenix, where he glanced off the wall going into turn 3 and then hit the outside wall, collected a couple other drivers. I think he actually kind of went too hard on himself about explaining the situation and trying to understand it. And then in this race here, when he was interviewed afterwards, he was talking about he was worried he was jumping the start, and he was trying to kind of back off a little bit and, not try to screw anything up for Kyle Larson here in the process, just trying to kind of play his role in it, and then still trying to work with it even when he had the lead or was among the leaders there at the same time. I thought he was very down to earth in both those interviews, and, hopefully this is a side of him that becomes something that's more noticeable. I think in the past, whether it's been his just utter dominance of these super speedway races, he hasn't really shown that much. It seems like it's been much more like, he's kind of one of those drivers where it's always somebody else's fault, or, how dare this person get in my way, or something like that. And I get the competitive spirit of that, but again, I've noticed it in these last couple of interviews with him. Maybe, I don't know if something's changed or what it has, or what it's been, maybe something over this off season or something. But I've noticed that difference. I don't know if any of you guys have at the same time, but there was definitely that there too. Larson in 4th, Sheldon Creed in the 5th spot, Jesse Love, Brandon Jones, Nick Sanchez, Daniel Dye, and Carson Kvapil rounding out the top 10. Kvapil, mentioning him, actually briefly in last place at the start of the race, moving out of the way of Harrison Burton, who had spun his tires or had a missed shift or something in front of him. Again, mentioning this earlier, could have easily been a big stack up there at the start. However, again, Kvapil did a good job missing the wreck. Unfortunately, NASCAR still penalizes you in these cases, and I get the team's frustration over that. But Kvapil did a fine job recovering from that to still get a top 10 run. Again, once the mechanical gremlins and the pit penalties and whatever anything else is out there, he's going to be very, very tough. We already saw hints of this last year when he almost won that Dover race in that 88 car. He's going to be very, very tough this year. So I'm very excited to see what we can get out of him there too. Also a great day for RSS racing, which may seem strange given where they actually finished in this race. Both of them outside the top 20 for Ryan Sieg and Kyle Sieg. But shades of what we saw back in 2020 when you had the Mike Harmon Racing duo, but it was Bailey Curry and Kyle Weatherman. I remember during the depths of the COVID pandemic, you had that Homestead race with nobody in the stands. And in the early laps, I think in both races, when they had dual races out there, you had both the 47 and the 74 working out that tire strategy short pitting a little bit and then really kind of jumping up there to actually try to get a good finish in stage one, indeed getting some stage points in that case. That season was really interesting with that program. Of course, the first top 10 that Weatherman ultimately got for him over at Kentucky. Later on, Curry getting a top 10 at Phoenix. A tremendous effort that program had. In this case here, very similar situation. Ryan Sieg and Kyle Sieg in particular. Kyle was getting up there. Leland Honeyman was getting up there for the Cope family racing team. All of them competing at the end of stage one to get as many stage points as they could. Kyle almost pulling off the win. Sammy Smith gets around him on the last lap. Smith ends up getting the stage victory. But they were definitely there that day. And a sponsor really missed their chance to get a lot of exposure out there, because I was retweeting that this week, that the 2018 was looking for a sponsor. They ultimately didn't get one, unfortunately, but they got a lot of screen time, and hopefully that's going to help them much more the next time that they go out there. And then brother Ryan Sieg out there was right behind him in third at the end of that stage, had a flat tire, dropped him back in the order. I don't know what exactly happened to Kyle, but it seemed like it was just whatever it was something on pace, but dropped them further back in the rankings. And same thing with Leland Honeyman. Honeyman had a flat tire, dropped him multiple laps down, ended up back in the 34th spot there. But I'd say all three of those teams, the two RSS guys and Honeyman there in the 70 car, they were definitely there that day. And hopefully the luck turns their way in a future race there coming up the next few weeks. We're very early in the season. We'll see how all of that develops at the same time. Mentioned Christian Eckes with a blown engine there after 16 laps, qualified in the 5th spot. Surprising turn of events there. Eckes had never finished last in any of his Truck Series starts, including his dominant season for the McAnally team last year in the number 19. 16 car ends up in last place, though, in only his 5th or 6th series start. 6th, that is. Yeah, just from this year, that 16 car there. So he ends up in the 38th spot. He was the feature for yesterday's article. Corey Heim had the same hiccup, or a very similar issue there in the number 24 for Sam Hunt Racing. Just a snake bit weekend for him at a track where you would expect him to be very fast. Certainly contending for the win in the Truck Series and contending for a top 10 in the Xfinity Series. Unfortunately, a 24 car ends up out of the race after just 57 laps with that electrical issue. Matt DiBenedetto had a great start to the weekend, qualified in the 10th spot for Viking Motorsports. Unfortunately, he has electrical problems as well. Drops him down to the 36th spot. Mason Maggio for the Joey Gase effort, the number 53, and Honeyman rounding out your bottom 5 there as well. Number 16 car ends up being your last place finisher there as well. So a bit of a dramatic reversal of fortune there at the end of the Xfinity race. Again, another race that Kyle Larson shouldn't have been in, but still was very dominant at the same respect there too, and put on a good show there too. We'll go and slam headlong into the Truck Series race where Kyle Larson did pull off that win. And again, give him any kind of offset there to kind of get back out there, whether it's spinning out on the apron, almost saving the truck during that tight battle with Lane Riggs, and getting back out there. This was probably of the two races between the Xfinity and the Truck Series race. I'd say in this particular case, you could probably argue more the angle of him bringing out the best of the other drivers in the field. Certainly the other drivers that were competing with him. But I think that's just because he didn't have the best truck in the field, because he did spin out, and because Corey Heim's engine was stumbling there at the end. Those are things that you just can't count on from one week to the next. But under these particular circumstances, as they were setting up, it put on a hell of a show. And I think Lane Riggs also got a ton of more attention that he definitely deserved. And another driver that didn't get mentioned that much during this same race, but undeniably had a fast truck, was Tyler Ankrum. Yes, he finished in 4th, and it's easy to say that as he was among the leaders there. But again, all weekend with a 6th place qualifying run, he was always in and around there. Would have been probably the best Chevrolet in the field if not for Kyle Larson being in the field. I thought they were all putting on a great show. Ross Chastain, another Cup guy, really shouldn't be out there too, sticking his nose in there every once in a while. Being a factor. Caden Honeycutt looking good there at certain points. But yeah, Lane Riggs and Tyler Ankrum and even the injured Heim truck ended up just putting on an absolute clinic out there. And it was great to see, because this track, it's just such a wonderful track, that puts on such great competitive races, all the different lanes you can pick. And, again, even if you're struggling as bad as Heim did to lead 78 laps, still finish 3rd with that wounded truck where it just kept shutting down. Heim, it seems It seems very unlikely that Larson would have still won this race with Heim's truck at full song, because he was just so fast. And even with an injured truck running that well, that just speaks to just, that Toyota effort, that Toyota support, the Toyota Gazoo deal there with them. Just a tremendous effort out there on that. So that was really good to see. Randy Bowman bringing this up here for the Truck Series race as well. The driver's broadcast. Yes, can't overlook that at all. I think the group that they had there was pretty solid. And this was mentioned, I didn't mention it, but somebody else was mentioning it with Kevin Harvick. The fact that he was there in closer to a main play-by-play role and didn't have Clint Boyer there kind of interrupting him or, something like that. He was much, much better in the booth in this. He was very good. I thought he did a great job there. The pit reporters were always having fun. They always kind of goof around a bit more, which is understandable. Mentioned Hocevar earlier. He had Austin Cindric down there too. I thought they did a solid job there in the booth there, and Harvick, kind of setting the tone there for that. I still don't think he has he has kind of a limit on where, how excited he can get over a moment. And I think that's just kind of, it's like the same thing if you put Kyle Larson in the booth. It's just like they don't have very high highs or low lows. They kind of stay pretty middle of the road there. And I think that works really well for an analyst. I don't think that works very good for a play-by-play. What he was saying worked really well, especially towards the end of the race there. But yeah, again, I think that wasn't 100% of it. I'm trying to remember who else was in the booth. Was it Logano this time again? Because Logano, I've never been that big of a fan of the booth because he just laughs and it just kind of derails everything all the time. Yeah, gosh, I'm trying to remember. I remember Harvick. Harvick stood out in this one, and it was noticeable there in that. It wasn't Kez. Or was it Kez? Was it Kez? I don't remember. It's mentioned in the chat there. I'll definitely, I need to think of that offhand. But again, I thought in general it was an enjoyable broadcast. I thought that it would help that the race had as much drama as it did with what was happening with Heim's truck, with Larson coming back from the spin, and with Lane Riggs just putting on a clinic out there with the donuts on the truck and all that, and just looking really good out there. It was Brad Keselowski. Okay, yeah, and Brad's fine too, because Brad's got that history. He shows motion a bit better. He's still got a bit of a ceiling there as well. It's very similar to Harvick, but a little bit more so. And then of course the history that he's aware of with the sport and the mechanical know-how. We talked about Kyle Busch's role in the booth back at Las Vegas there last week, and again, fantastic job he did. He would have fit in just fine with this one too. So it was Brad and Logano. Okay, that's interesting. See, I don't remember Logano that much in this broadcast, which is unusual. I don't know if he just got different notes or what, or maybe I've just not remembered it there. But I don't remember him being as distracting as he usually is. So that's definitely a good step that direction. But regardless, Larson ends up your winner. Lane Riggs in the second spot, Corey Heim in third, Tyler Ankerman fourth, Daniel Hemrick back to fifth. The rest of the top 10, you got Ross Chastain, Jake Garcia, Chandler Smith in the second front row truck, Grant Enfinger, and Caden Honeycutt rounding out your top 10 there. Brandon Jones had a pretty paint scheme there on the other Tricon All-Star entry there, finishing in the 12th spot in the Kingsford entry. Congrats to Akinori Ogata for getting his team into the race for the first time. He was going to attempt the Atlanta race for the Akinori Performance team he put together, bringing the number 63 back for the first time since DJ Kopp last ran what was the Mike Mittler entry a few years ago. But came back out there, finished in the 32nd spot out there, finishing the race under power, although 10 laps down at the checkered flag. Michel Disdier coming back into the sport for the first time in about 5 or 6 years, and kind of an interesting effort, kind of looking up the research there on Mr. Brainwash, the street artist there that designed that very colorful scheme. Again, great paint schemes this weekend in general. But the one on the 67 truck there for Disdier was really cool. Another artist of French ancestry as well, being involved in designing this paint scheme out there. And apparently, I didn't realize till checking out the artist website, like how much he'd been involved in motorsports or just designing paint schemes. Sometimes literal paint schemes, just throwing cans of paint at cars out there. But this one here was definitely one that stood out there in the results. The last place battle was quite a bit shorter in this race here. The very beginning of the race there looked like it was going to come down to Giovanni Ruggiero who collected Ben Rhodes after a stack up there on the start. Looked like Chastain got into Ruggiero and sent him up the track, and then Rhodes just had nowhere else to go. So, fortunately, both trucks actually were able to continue with relatively minor damage, although Ruggiero ended up multiple laps down in 29th, and Rhodes ended up with a suspension issue resulting from the impact that dropped him back to 33rd. However, your last place finisher in this one, Stephen Malozzi gets gets his second consecutive last place finish in the Truck Series, the third in a row for the Josh Realm number 2 effort there. Driver, if you really think about it in the Truck Series here, it's very rare to have back-to-back last place runs. It's the first time we've had that in that series going back to 2020, and we haven't had a 3 or 4 time one. I believe it's like 2018 or 2017. Back when Caleb Rourke was driving for the Jennifer Jo Cobb effort, driving the 10 truck and having multiple last place runs back then. I believe it was Rourke is the only driver that had 3 in a row, and definitely the only one to have 4 in a row. Nobody's had 5 in a row. So kind of a similar situation to that. So we'll see if that's going to be the case for the next Truck Series race coming up, or if that's going to be another storyline coming up there as well. But an early race for him, only about 15 laps into the event, reporting some issues. I thought it was going to be an overheating issue there. They were talking about the temperature on the truck, but ultimately out of the race listed with a vibration as the reason out there for the number 2 truck this time around. Let's see here. So Malozzi, Rhodes, Ogata, Disdier, and McGee are bottom 5. A very diverse range there. A couple international drivers in the field there at the bottom of the end of the field. And I think a pretty solid race for this one. Yes, Ryan Ellis's paint scheme, Andrew, as well. Yeah, that was a great paint scheme. The 71 car in the Xfinity race looked really nice. And we'll see what the look is on that going forward. That's most of what I have on this. Let me check my notes here. I don't know if I did notes this week to follow up on. Yeah, okay, we just got Larson. I got the remote broadcast. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I know in the Xfinity Series race, there were a couple of moments where, it just seemed like they would look at a replay and they weren't sure what happened and they just move on to something else. It seemed like in the past there was either one of them would be looking out the window or something else would be caught, or they have like another reporter bring something up. It seemed like they had less gaps in it there. But yeah, I'm struggling to think of exact examples, but I know it felt that way for sure. Now, certainly them saying it was remote broadcast and showing these remote segments didn't help, but yeah, that felt like the case there too. Let's see here. Yeah, Ryan Ellis. Oh, the top 20 as well. Did he? I lost track of him. I know that he had, where was he? 20th place. Yeah, there we go. Last car on the lead lap in the Xfinity race. So yeah, great job by Ellis. All these teams just had such wonderful merch they've been producing lately. I know Ellis's team for Bristol, he's got the Four Loko paint scheme coming back, and they had like a glow-in-the-dark shirt on the deal there too. So that was a good effort. Nakanori Ogata's actually got some merch on his page too. For the 63. I always like to retweet those too, because you never know, especially if you're going to the haulers at the track and you don't find something you exactly like. Maybe you want something that's a bit more obscure. I like to kind of post those there at the same time. So good to see them stay involved in that and promoting some new backers there as well on that end. Let's see here. Yeah, I think that's most of what I got here, too. Let me jump into Super Chats. I'll do this a little bit out of order because I saw a couple pop up here, and definitely thank you for this as well. I do want to jump into that. Bowser Jr. XD for $4.99. Thank you so much. Don't know how well this was picked up on the broadcast, but the thermal broadcast died for 20 minutes. Fox actually showed the Cup race during that time. Yes, thank you for mentioning that, Bowser Jr. Challenging situation there for the broadcast team there. Our William Saki that's covering the IndyCar race, I saw him mentioning that on the social media there as well. He does our last car coverage for IndyCar. And speaking of which, his article for St. Petersburg is going to be coming tomorrow. I know that the first round has already happened a little while ago. We got that article coming up there for you. So if you want to check out our open wheel coverage at lastcar.info, We'll be having that for you very shortly. But yeah, disastrous situation. I understood that they lost the footage and the timing and scoring, and people just didn't know what was happening. You got Marshall Pruitt and these other guys that followed the circuit there, just completely at a loss. I know this thermal course, being a club circuit, and I guess it's outside Palm Springs, so it's just in the middle of nowhere. I guess the logistics of maintaining that event was already challenging. It seemed so last year, but even more so here. Unfortunate deal there for them. I think for Fox, it's probably the best they could do is at least show the Cup Series race in the meantime. But yeah, again, I wasn't covering that race this weekend there. Hopefully, everybody else that was catching it. I don't know if somebody was mentioning if like those 20 minutes are going to be like lost media, like nobody's going to have any footage of what happened from this lap to that lap. Did they catch up on, did they like backtrack to earlier in the race, or did it go back to live? I don't know. Definitely mention in the chat for anybody that was following it there too. But that'll be another thing at the same time. But yes, thank you for mentioning that there as well, Bowser Jr. So we'll get back to, oh yes, Beast of Metal, thank you for your super chat as well for $5. Artie Kempner got lured away from Fox by ESPN. Many seemed enthused by this revelation, but others, such as Iceberg, have voiced concerns. Your thoughts? You know, I did hear this bit of news, and I wasn't clear if he was actually lured, if he wasn't still serving this role with Fox and doing that too. Was he actually brought over from one network to the other? That was, I didn't really get that much information on the story there at the time. I thought it was something else he was taking on while still doing NASCAR. You know, again, I've discussed at length on this show whether a lot of the issues of the TV broadcast have been an issue of talent versus an issue of direction. And if we are in the process of getting a new director, especially since Artie Kempner has been involved with Fox Sports for as long as he has, and should deserve credit for the good times there in the booth versus the other case there too. You know, they do need to get new talent in there. And I don't think it's just a matter of people in the booth. It is other things you got to look at too. You got to maximize the most out of it, which I think is what we've seen out of the CW, for example. So, and again, maybe this is why today's Fox broadcast, you know, really wasn't that bad. I mean, it's still got a little bit of those elements, and we're still ways off from where we need to be. But it did feel a little bit more cohesive, at least to me today. I felt like I was actually able to track what was happening in this race better. I felt like I was more engaged in the action itself. I felt like there was less distractions in here. And I assume, if that was the case, that, yeah, they have a new director in there and so forth. The colors, I think the color schemes seemed a little bit better, even with the smoke in the air from the fires this week there too. I think it was better. It felt like it. I don't feel as frustrated from today's broadcast. And I wasn't really looking for, you know, for things in that same sense there too. So yeah, again, I think if they did do something else and they just bring somebody else new in there, it can only help. I mean, at the worst, you know, if there is some issues there, maybe they're at least different issues than the ones we've had, you know, as somebody's kind of learning the ropes and figuring it out. But if there was a new director for this weekend, I think they did a pretty solid job. I think it really wasn't that bad. I don't have that many complaints about the race today. I thought that it was in general covered pretty well in that. And there were a couple smaller moments like Cole Custer's near spin at the start. I feel that could have been covered a bit better, especially on the opening lap of the race. But again, it's small. It's I know we're talking about small issues and how they stack up, but it really didn't feel like as many issues, at least to me. And I was pretty plugged into it this time because the last place battle was taking as long as it did. So, you know, I was focusing much more on the race itself, because a lot of times we get like a couple drivers that are laps down and they're not losing more laps and they're kind of within shouting distance of each other. You don't really set it and forget it, but it's not something that you just kind of have listening to the scanner audio in the background, and that's enough. That's enough to really kind of follow that there too. So yeah, so I think that I think it was pretty good. Was it a remote broadcast, or were they actually at the track? I don't know. Yeah, no, Brian, I agree too. Yeah, broadcasting remote doesn't help. Absolutely not. No, you got to be there. I mean, in any sport, I know that there's efficiency concerns, but again, it's not this. You can't have it be at the same level as, you know, like me sitting here and trying to do play-by-play, just watching what's on screen, and I know that they have a couple other things they're looking at. They got a leaderboard that's showing what the order is. They got a couple other camera views, that's in that studio, and they got all the whiz-bang stuff they can put behind them to make it look like there's some big compound or something they're in, and rather than a room with just, 3 green walls behind them. You got to be there. You got to be there because in racing, and it's particularly important in racing. I mean, you could probably make this argument about just about any sport, about all the little things that happen. You have the football game, you got everybody lined up, you got the other players on the sidelines, you got the coaches, you got the coordinators up in the booth. You got a lot of things happening at once. It's got to get tracked. And racing's the same way, and it's doubly so because it's not just 2 teams. You got every other team that's out there. You got the pit crews. You got just the weather. You got how that can change track conditions. You got the mechanical side of it. The people in the garage area if they're back there. There's a lot, and to think about doing that remotely, it's just not going to be as good. It really isn't, because you're beholden then to the cameramen to just show what they can show, and you don't know what you're missing until you've already missed it. So that's the other problem, because the best broadcasts are just like in the moment and you just jump right on it. I can tell a little bit in this Fox broadcast even today that Ryan Blaney's engine failure happened earlier than it did. That, the footage seemed to stop and then start right before Blaney's engine blew. It was kind of a small thing there too, which I get. But again, you could always kind of go back and show them on pit road and just explain what the caution's for, and then go back and show a replay of the engine failure. It's just, again, whether that's a consequence of a new director or the same problems we've seen before, that remains to be seen. But I think it's another place to look at that at the same time. But yes, no, thank you for the super chat there as well, Beast of Metal, on that. Yeah, I mean, it could be something that maybe we're already noticing a little bit here, but maybe it's something that's gonna be more noticeable later in the Fox season. It'll be one way to find out. It can only help. It can only help. That's my conclusion on that, because they can't rest on their laurels. They can't do it the same way. They've now been doing it for longer than the golden age ESPN did it. I mean, ESPN only had it for 20 years before they were off the air in 2001, or they lost their cup coverage rather, and Fox and NBC took over. We're now 25 plus years, 25 years into the Fox one here. And is it that much better than it was at the start? I can't really say so. Not in the same way that ESPN in 2000 was better than ESPN in 1981. It may seem unfair to make that comparison given technological advancements, but that's just the way it is. That should be the way with anything. Where you are in your life, where whatever you are passionate about, I'm sure that your grasp of it is better now than it was in the past, and it's the same thing that should apply to these professionals too. So that's, I think that's the way to really look at it. I think it's the most logical way to look at it. Yesterday was remote. Yes. Okay. That's right, Brian. Yeah. Saturday was remote. And again, it was noticeable. And that's where Adam Alexander, I think, is still a detriment, because he is a very much a piece of the way those broadcasts used to be. I think when you have those mistakes and you have those gaps, it kind of falls back into those habits where, they're kind of goofing around or laughing or just getting away from the story of the race, and hopefully things turn the corner there. But I hope that's not that common. But the problem is, when you give one of these networks a toy like that, they're going to use it as much as possible. I hope that that's not going to be as much, because, there's so much around the CW needs to be fixed, not the least of which being its accessibility to people that still haven't seen any of the Xfinity races this year. It's terrible for them. Terrible. I feel horrible for them. And they need to get that worked out yesterday. That should have been worked out well in advance of this year. And any other issues they're still having, I heard there was something where some people didn't have the audio to it, that they had the video accessible. Those are Bush League issues that have to be worked out. Just absurd. So hopefully that gets worked out at the same time. Michael Jensen, thank you for your super chat there as well for $5. Kind of a random question. The Ogata number 63 truck, is that the remnants of the Mittler 63 truck? Racing Reference doesn't list an owner for it yet. As far as my understanding is, good question. As far as my understanding is, the Mittler team isn't around anymore, because it's been a number of years. It's not unheard of to have a team come back from being pretty much shuttered. Of course, if you think back to the Rise of the Field Fillers episode I did on Mach 1 Incorporated, the team that came up there in 2004, the William Edwards effort, was exactly the same team that had been the Skull Bandit deal there with Mach 1 before the Leo Jackson effort began in like 1989. So that team, it was around and you had some of the same people involved. I don't know if the same people like DJ Kopp are involved in the Ogata effort. It does seem like it's very much a grassroots effort there. They showed pictures of the truck kind of parked next to the late model that Ogata's been running there as well. The other thing is Ogata's been running Toyotas here versus the Chevrolets that Mittler's teams had. It's not to say it's impossible to transfer, one chassis to another, but from my understanding, at least from what I've heard so far, it seems like it's just coincidental that they're running the same number. So unless that's changed, I mean, hopefully we'll get some more information on the more races they run. Certainly hope they run Rockingham so I could ask him personally, but we'll find out if that's going to be the story. But a good question, Michael. It's a very good question. And because that 63 number, as you heard from the Larry Gunselman video in the same Mach 1 Incorporated deal, it had a lot of significance to the direction that Mittler's team went after the death of Tony Roper when he drove the 26 at Texas and had that accident out there, that they wanted to change the car number when Gunselman came on board, and Gunselman suggested the 63 for the Battleship Missouri out in the harbor, and always passing that by. So that was just a tremendous effort there. It was the Missouri, wasn't it? I know, Brian, you're big into, I've seen a lot of vintage warships and such on your feed there as well, so correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, again, a tremendous history in that number. It's good to see it out there in any ability, and probably a good tribute to the Mittler team would be another small team that's kind of a grassroots effort that develops. And if Ogata is struggling, as he has in the past in the Xfinity series, maybe it becomes a vehicle for the next Carl Edwards, Jamie McMurray, or so forth, to kind of develop their career in the truck series and get their feet under them. Not saying that's where this team is headed, but perhaps maybe that option should always be there. We see that with the Josh Realm team. We see that with some other programs out there, but it's very few of them. You just really don't see that as much these days versus full-time drivers in that circuit. And there's a lot that could be said about the complexion of the truck series circuit and what caliber of teams are the most common out there. It's another place to look at it. Charlie, thank you as well for checking out here. I know you're excited about the Cartoon Network video. I'm glad you are. Brian, again, big thanks to you for your pictures you've contributed as well to that video there. We've been able to get those integrated into the video this weekend. I'll go ahead and jump right into this here. So, Cartoon Network Wacky Racing video is really coming together here. I was actually just kind of getting some other video clips and such together this weekend. Percentage-wise, I don't know. I think we're probably about 65% done, which it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a 3-part thing, and it's going to be about 4 hours long. So it's just a matter of now just filling in the gaps on the visuals there, which the pictures have really helped and the video have helped. I need to get the text effects in there. I think that'll be the next big piece that's going to get it going. I'm still aiming for a late March, early April release. I definitely want to get it out at least to the Patreon members before we travel to Rockingham and Talladega in mid-April. That's the big goal right now. So I've been kind of focusing on that a little bit. A little bit. It's kind of been pretty much the only thing lately, honestly. But I think we're getting there. I think it'll be pretty good. And really kind of emphasizing just different aspects of this sponsorship and how big of a deal it was for those number of years. In fact, I have something here I'll go ahead and jump into our show and tell because it kind of ties into this at the same time. One of the famous paint schemes was this one right here. I picked up this a while back here. Don't you just miss when they marketed the sport this way? They make these little pillow. It's not a Beanie Baby. It's more like a plush one here, and made out of vinyl. But of Lake Speed's car from 1998, the Huckleberry Hound paint scheme. You can kind of bring that a little bit closer there. There we go. But really fun detail. I have a Jimmy Johnson one of these we had from years ago. But I love it's such a perfect combination because they made these in other schemes, but it's got that kind of cartoonish angle to it where the wheels are just kind of bulging out. The curves of it are just kind of an interesting pattern there, not very aerodynamic, but of course it has the Cartoon Network Wacky Racing logo there on the back of it there. And then here, get the other side of it there too. The other wonderful thing with these schemes is how both sides are different. Like, it's not the exact same pattern, but it all goes together. And this is another thing that is going to be discussed. Really, the first part of this 3-part series is really going to focus more on kind of some overwhelming concepts that the designers had when they came up with these, and how well those were able to kind of be maintained through the process of this program, where they marketed different characters, sometimes different shows, and had more than a dozen different paint schemes in this about 4 or 5 year period. But this is one that always stands out. Lake Speed drove this paint scheme in the first part of 1998, including the Daytona 500, where, if you remember, the caution that Dale Earnhardt won the 1998 Daytona 500 was because of this car and John Andretti spinning off of turn 2 to the inside. And we did race to the caution back then. And of course, Earnhardt reached the caution flag. So the reason that race was not ending under green was in part because of this paint scheme there, which is going to be one of the stories discussed in that, which I think is going to be one of the the sound of this thing is coming over the microphone. One of the aspects of the story is, really going to be more or less a race-by-race analysis of when these paint schemes ran and what role they may have played in some races, or maybe what role they had in races that maybe you don't really remember as well, but maybe were good performances by this team. Indeed, Lake Speed, when he drove this car, it was kind of a career resurgence for him after a very difficult 1997 when they didn't have that much sponsorship. But this is going to be another feature on that. So, yeah, really neat deal here on this. I just kind of had this in the background here. But I would love to see something like a more modern version of this. You could definitely do that. Just imagine, I guess we have had that. Didn't we have plush, like the Hendrick Motorsports teams did something recently, didn't they? Where they had, like, it wasn't vinyl like this, but it was closer to like more of a fabric design. I seem to remember they did this like towards the end of Dale Jr.'s career. It's been a while. I got to get back in the swing of like seeing what's available these days at the souvenir haulers at the teams. But there you go. You got kind of little designs here. I like the little squeegee and the spray bottle there right behind the rear glass. What's kind of fun with this too is, this particular design, they kind of had the characters kind of resemble pit crew members, but the hijinks ensuing there alongside. So that's always a really fun one to check out. So that was one of the things I kind of was looking through some stuff in my own collection and kind of checking out some other stuff there too to kind of add into the video. Because this is one, especially given the fact that the driver that ended up replacing Lake Speed was Jerry Nadeau. And of course, as I mentioned in the trailer that was posted a couple weeks ago, Nadeau is going to be one of the 2 drivers interviewed along with Jeff Green to kind of cover aspects of, the team's sponsorship there. So it's coming together really well. Hopefully we'll have something pretty close to Throwback Weekend in Darlington. I think would be a great time to have it out. I know we got Bristol the week after that. Stay tuned on that for sure. And if you're interested in some more information on that, definitely consider checking out my Patreon, patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock. We had a few new members here this week, so big thanks to them for joining up. I got some other stuff I need to mail out this week for that. But yeah, things are very exciting. So I'm very excited to get this video out. And we got, I know Brian knows that we got already a good progress on the next video coming after that. Just some great visuals to go with that too. So it's going to be very exciting. Brian Hallman there at the BRH Racing Archives, always providing great materials on that too. So, it's going to be, it's going to be just a really busy year. But yeah, the biggest thing too is I'm trying not to overlook the fact that we got these races coming up here. I was just looking at the schedule for the Rockingham race, and they're going to do a track walk there the first day. Would love to be make sure to participate in that too. And hopefully just meeting up with people too out there. I know we don't go to the East Coast that often, but looking to do much more of that in the future here as well. And again, those of you in the Patreon, big thanks to you for helping make that possible too. Especially, it's always a challenge here in California, kind of branch out that much more. But especially now with a lot of our venues kind of going away, losing Fontana, losing Irwindale, and so forth. But Sears Point in July will be our next one after these 2 races here in the spring. And then the Phoenix Championship in November is still going to be the plans for our trackside coverage this season. Let's see here. Yeah. Oh, Michael. Yes, mentioning all the turbulence there for the situation there with the Melling team. Yeah, they had so many different drivers and so little sponsorship too. I mean, it really did kind of put that team in a tailspin. Not to give too much away in the video, but it is going to be very much a story about the individuals involved and the teams involved, and really the artistry involved in these schemes. I think those are probably going to be the big three focuses there, on top of the typical race by race action there. And that it's a very exciting project. It's probably the most fun I've had on one of these. It reminds me a lot of the Country Time Lemonade one, going into the merchandising and the at track promotions and stuff with the sponsorship. That's the kind of stuff I really wanted to get into, and fortunately, there's some great material on that. So yeah, I'm gonna be working on it right again tonight after we get done with the article here, which again unofficially looks to be Carson Hocevar. Do we have a call on inspection yet? I haven't. Let me take a look at my page to find out. I know Pockrass is in thermal for the IndyCar race there, so it's been a bit of a challenge, but I'll check his feed here at the same time. Looking further back. The Cup race results still showing. Yeah, I don't think I see it quite yet. Hocevar leading once for 4 laps and finishing 9th in stage 2. However, ends up your last place finisher, pending, of course, the results of post-race inspection. Fastest lap of the race. This is a good thing to cover here as well. For the Cup Series race, Bubba Wallace on lap 218 at a 32.335. So again, congrats to Bubba for getting the 1 bonus point there as well. Things will tighten up as the year goes on. Again, I think that's a great promotion. It needs to be brought up more. The Fox Network, they've experimented with it a bit, but the way the CW does it, where they have like a little stopwatch appearing next to it, we saw it with Justin Bonsignor for part of yesterday's race, and then it jumped to a couple other different drivers after that. So Bonsignor had kind of a difficult second half of the race there too. But I think, didn't they say that Allgaier ran his fastest lap of the race on the last lap? Was that the fastest lap of the race? And it was something that was brought up with that too. But yeah. No call yet. Okay, there we go. Yeah, Charlie, yep, I agree. The blue Dexter's Lab scheme, that's one of my favorites too. Absolutely gorgeous paint job too. Fond memories of that paint job at the same time. They did not backtrack at thermal. They went back to live. Okay, no, thank you for mentioning it, Bowser Jr. Oh, that sucks. That sucks. I hate that. But there we go. Matt Zenny, I'm seeing your question here. What would be your Mount Rushmore of Hendrick? Not counting Gordon, Jr., Johnson, and Larson. Well, I mean, that pretty much would be your Mount Rushmore. But if we're not counting those, well, I mean, I'm going to have to put Jerry up there for winning the Atlanta race. Probably Schrader, Jeff Bodine. Schrader for his longevity and all that. And then Tim Richmond. Yeah, that would probably be the next one. Yeah, I mean, Jerry gets, kind of more of an honorary spot because, yeah, I mean, I can't leave that out. But I mean, I think definitely if you're, if probably most would argue the other three, I'd say, yeah, Jeff Bodine, Schrader, and Tim Richmond, just playing a massive role with that team. Maybe others would rather have Ricky Rudd up there, which, you could probably argue that too. He had a pretty decent career there, got second in the 1991 championship. You could look at that at the same time. Maybe Darrell Waltrip, you probably want to put him there instead to kind of get the tide ride started in the 17 team, even though that wasn't really that many years in his career, although it was his Daytona 500 winner. It's that 4th spot I think is more of a wiggler. Good question, though. Good question, Matt. We'll go into trivia here now. Terry Labonte, yep. Andrew, yep. Austin, yep. Absolutely. Again, that 4th spot is a tricky one. I don't know if I put Terry Labonte ahead of Jeff Bodine, Richmond, or Schrader. Even Schrader. I know Schrader, you could probably identify with a lot of different teams because he had such a long career. I don't know. It's one I always think of. That's one I always tend to. Yeah, 96 championship. Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, Terry Labonte. It's yeah, it would probably, it's hard to say. I'd still put Schrader over Labonte, but I can see the argument definitely put Labonte over Schrader. for sure. No considering for Chase Elliott. Yeah, well, that story is still being written. You know, he's won a championship. He's undeniably the sport's most popular driver. Yeah, it's too early to tell. When I think the Mount Rushmore, I think, you know, drivers that are retired. Although, I mean, Larson, you know, is pretty easy one to put on the current list is what was being pointed out there early too. So, you know, there's an exceptions to the exceptions. Alrighty. We'll do some trivia questions here to wrap up. So, once again, NASCAR pits, teams, tracks, drivers in the wild card. Definitely let me know which one you'd like, and we'll do some questions there to wrap up. I'll kind of browse the chat here and kind of check some other stuff here at the same time. Where are we? Actually, let me look at this too. Kind of look ahead to next week. We got Martinsville coming up. Is the package for the Cup Series going to be any better, or are we going to have very significant challenges with passing? Are we also going to have the option tires? I know we tested that at Martinsville last year and had a pretty kind of crazy deal there too. Are we seeing that this time around? I haven't heard one way or the other, but we'll find out if that's the case. Obviously had kind of an interesting Phoenix weekend. But yes, indeed, triple header weekend. We got the Truck Series on Friday, Xfinity on Saturday, and the Cup on Sunday. So yeah, a series of triple header weekends. We're plowing right through all three of the schedules and already kind of setting up your NASCAR championship battles. We can kind of look at a couple of those at the same time here. Pulling up here. Where is it? So yeah, on the Xfinity Series side, we have, I believe Dean Thompson is still the leader on that. In position for the NASCAR Truck Series Championship before, now in position for an Xfinity one. The only driver with multiple bottom five finishes in the Xfinity side. Chris Wright is leading everybody without a last place run with 1 bottom 5 and 3 bottom 10s. And then the Truck Series with Malazzi scoring this one. He's now the first repeat last place finisher out of 4 races here. Keith McGee and Parker Kligerman, the only other one-timers. Nathan Bird behind him with 2 bottom 5s and 4 bottom 10s, which is already more bottom 10s than Malazzi has. Malazzi, of course, more of a part-timer there in the number 2 truck. We will see if things change on that end. Let me check. Oh, yeah, there is another thing I need to bring up. Where is this on here? Trying to search my own posts here. Can I do that this way? Looking here. It's not there. Where is it? Goodness. Nope. Nope, that's old. That's old. Where did it go? Oh yeah, David Land's gonna have a field day with the blackout there for that. I already see that popping up on my feed here. Just got to scroll back. I know I had it on my feed. I should have bookmarked it. Did I bookmark it? I should have bookmarked it. Thrill and amazement as I scroll through my feed here. Let's see. Nope, it was before that. Oh, hoping Josh Williams is feeling better as well. Understand him having pneumonia during these last couple weeks. I believe it was Coda that he started not feeling well, and tremendous effort for him to actually reach the finish line there in the Xfinity Series race this weekend. Really wasn't expecting that, especially for the discomfort he was having in Las Vegas, but a great turnaround for him under extremely difficult circumstances. Let's see, not that. Gosh, was it this far back? Nope, not that. I like the throwback scheme to Jim Clark there for Josh Berry. Looking at that feed earlier here, too. Yeah, beautiful paint scheme. I think that racing stripe there, the British racing green and all that on there is going to look really good, even on the Cup car here. Not that. I got it. I guess we could talk about Denny Hamlin having the Progressive Insurance sponsorship. You know, for the drawback of actually having more Progressive ads on there, it's still a good deal for him. It looks like he's going to be an anchor sponsor, pick up a big portion of the schedule. It looked good. It was a neat paint scheme. It seemed to work pretty well with the layout of the car there. So that'll be another one to bring up at the same time. Yes, I want to give a shout out to Eric Young at T Super Speedway on Twitter. Made a mention to my NASCAR page there on his site there, mentioning about people kind of branching out and having kind of unique views of the sport there. Definitely wanted to give him a shout out here after his stream there. Again, that's T Super Speedway on Twitter. Eric's had a very enjoyable podcast there as well, and I appreciated the mention of the site. Yeah, it's a quirky website there, as you all well know. And following the last place battle is its own kind of unusual aspect of it there too. But it's always very enjoyable, and looking forward to doing more of a trackside here coming up. Yeah, hopefully we get some more information on the Darlington throwbacks, Andrew. I agree. It seems like it's been a really long stretch without them, and we've only seen just 2 or 3 of them tops. Like, I mean, we had the Jim Clark one, and we had the Austin Cindric one, and I've seen a lot of fictional ones, and I don't know how many of those are real or not. Like, some really clever ones there too. But yeah, we'll see what the situation is. Yep, looking forward to seeing Denny's AM/PM scheme at Sears Point. Yep, that's going to be good. That's going to be good. Desert Fox should be a nice paint job there on that. I kind of like what they were doing. Let's see. Tech is complete. We already have a call on that. Okay, we can check that. Alrighty. There it is. Yes, Bacchus. Wow, man. This man does not miss anything. Cup Tech complete. No issues. 5 minutes ago. Larson is the winner. No cars. The R&D Center. So, yes, it will be a Carson Hocevar last place finish, which Last Bro is going to quite enjoy because he picked Larson to win because, of course, that's what happened. But that's okay. That's always what's fun about that, too. Yeah, no, Brian, I agree. Yeah, when they moved it away from the Southern 500, that seemed to be a good celebration of, just the sports history. I would argue, I think now in its current phase, I'm glad that this Darlington race isn't on Mother's Day weekend. I think that needed to be changed too, and just not have a race that weekend, or at least not that Sunday. I still feel very strongly about that. Having this race in early April, at least it's on a different weekend. I think now it would be great to have Throwback Weekend at North Wilkesboro, so you can see the paint schemes a bit more clearly. The one trade-off with Darlington, and again, I liked Throwback Weekend at the Southern 500. It was fun and an honor to be there a couple times and see them in person, and Darlington's very much a throwback kind of race. But in the race itself, the field gets strung out, and everybody's kind of running the walls and scraping the paint jobs up. I think if you did it at Wilkesboro, at a short track where you have a lot of great camera shots of these throwback paint schemes, it might show better on TV. And it's also very much a throwback of like bringing this track back. It's like bringing these paint schemes back. I think that would be kind of a fun thing to do there too. And specifically by having, that race bring back a 400 lap race there, not just an all-star race. Again, I think the Atlanta track is actually probably a better venue for all-star races today versus anything, but we'll see if that's going to be the story there too. Yeah, Darlington being in April weather. Again, I'm not, I didn't grow up in that area, but, I know that from seeing in the 2001 deal, the March weather seemed kind of rough for Darlington. We'll see if it's going to be a story there in April also. Throwback race at Martinsville for the oldest track. I mean, yeah, that's a possibility too. But we'll see if that's going to be another story there too. Oh, I'm seeing the altercation between Devlin DeFrancesco and Scott McLaughlin on Pockers's tweet. The Twitter feed, I was trying to say. They call it a tweed? I don't know if they call it that, but yeah, probably not. We'll get through here in a bit. Let's see. Okay. Oh, which category do people pick? We haven't done any trivia questions yet. NASCAR. I got 3 for NASCAR, 1 for wild card. Live a Leap 14. Yes, I am going to be going to the Rockingham races. That will be the first race I'll be covering in person this year. I am planning to be there for all three of the races, the Truck Series, ARCA East, and Xfinity races. I was originally talking about doing a starting grid video for that weekend. However, the time is just not going to work out because basically the ARCA East race is just between Xfinity qualifying and the Xfinity race. So if you're in the Patreon right now, I'm opening another poll for other suggestions about doing another Cup, Xfinity, or Truck Series starting grid later this year. Don't think we have any responses yet, so you have a good chance, if you haven't submitted your option in that chat, you have a good chance of having that be the winning candidate there. So we'll have that going here in a little bit. Yeah, let's do NASCAR for once. Okay, I agree. We'll do that. Let's see. Alrighty. Here we go. Okay, ooh, all right. Yeah, this is a good one. First question, we'll just do this here. What signature was on the check Jeff Gordon got for his Winston Million win? I assume this would be 97 there, because, of course, the Noble 5 came in afterwards. What signature was on the check Jeff Gordon got for his Winston Million win? So whose signature? You're going to be there too, Live Leap. Oh, yeah, we'll have to cross paths for sure. I'm sure they're going to do a tweet up. I always like coming out to those. I don't, it's not necessary for me to do my own thing there, so I'll probably be at that there. I imagine there's going to be a great turnout for that. I'm still waiting to hear back on credentials. We haven't got anything confirmed yet. Hopefully things are, all set there. But that'll be another storyline. I'm going to get some water here in the meantime while everybody gets their gets their answers in. Whose signature is on Jeff Gordon's check for the 97 Winston Million? Alrighty. Whoever the CEO of Winston was in 1997. Okay, we got guesses for Joe Camel, R.J. Reynolds, T. Wayne Robertson, Bill Elliott, Miss Winston, a Stickman. Okay, let's see. What signature was on the check Jeff Gordon got for his Winston Million win? The answer is R.J. Reynolds. R.J. Reynolds is the correct answer. Jude Fernandez, looks like you were the first one. Bean Boy 89. Charles Peterson Jr., your first guess was correct. Yeah, T-Wayne's a good guess, though. T-Wayne's a good guess. Winston Cup water. Yep, yeah, pretty much. I need to put a Winston Cup sticker on this thing here, too. That'll be perfect. All right. Got to bring this up here. I have it right next to the microphone. Okay, there we go. Let's see. Let's see. Next question. Whose 1997 Winston Cup winnings were $12,605 more than Bobby Labonte's? There we go. So almost a math question here. Whose 1997 Winston Cup winnings were $12,605 more than Bobby Labonte's? Don't look it up. Try to guess it. Who made $12,605 more than Bobby Labonte in the 1997 Winston Cup season? That's basically the question. I guess it's for Gordon, Mark Martin, and Terry Labonte. When I was a kid, I thought Winston was a person and he owned the cup, like the Stanley Cup. Oh, yeah. No, I can see that. I can see that. We were talking a bit on last week's show about kind of, misunderstandings about the sport. And I was talking about the idea of Last Bro's idea of drivers sleeping in the pylon, like having beds on each level there with the car covers. I'm like, man, that's really imaginative. The furthest I got was just the crews all riding in the team hauler from one race to the next and just traveling like a band, like in Days of Thunder when they get pulled over by the fake police officer. Whose 1997 Winston Cup winnings were $12,605 more than Bobby Labonte's? All right, we got guesses for Mark Martin, Terry Labonte, Dale Jarrett, Jeff Burton, Gordon, Burton, Jarrett, Earnhardt. Let's see. Here we go. Whose 97 winnings were more than Bobby Labonte's? The answer is Terry Labonte's. Terry Labonte's. Jude Fernandez, Austin Foster, Albert Shivers. You got it. Right on. Somebody got it earlier, though. I saw that up here. Ultimate 23 Dragon. Looks like you were the first, and then Austin Foster. And there you go. Yeah, I didn't know Winston was a cigarette brand until somebody told me. Yeah, it's kind of like when I had a Skull, had a Skull bumper sticker on my binder in the 7th grade. They made me take it off of there. And they didn't want to just like, oh, you know what, tobacco brand? I just thought it looked cool because it had Harry Gant's car on it. But yeah, there you go. Alrighty. Next question, how many of 1997's top 10 NASCAR Winston Cup drivers piloted Pontiacs? So we're looking for a number. How many of 1997's top 10 NASCAR Winston Cup drivers, so how many that finished top 10 in points, piloted Pontiacs? How many Pontiac drivers got in the top 10 in points in 1997? Again, don't look it up. It's too easy. I want to make it a little bit more challenging. Yes, thank you, Silent Spades. Yes, we see that inspection is clear. So Larson is the winner, and Hosivar is the last place finisher. I always pronounce it that way. I always say Hosivar, even though it's Hosivar. But there we go. It's only a matter of time until Michael Waltrip starts using it, and then I'm going to have to stop using it. All right, guesses for 2 and 3 and 69 and 1 and 4. Okay, here we go. How many of 1997's top 10 NASCAR Winston Cup drivers piloted Pontiacs? The answer is 1. 1. Is it Bobby Hamilton? I would think, in the 43. Or Bobby Labonte. Probably Labonte. Maybe Hamilton wasn't top 10. 1 is the correct answer. Yeah, that should be Bobby Labonte. Labonte would do better in Hamilton, the 43 car. I am going to look it up now. 97. 97 was one of those 2 years. 96 and 97, I didn't follow the sport quite as closely. And then 98, I made up for it big time and started kind of following it a lot closer. 98 to 99 was very much all about it. Yes, Bobby Labonte 7th in points that year. Schrader was a Chevy. Benson was 11th in points. He missed it by just 1 point from Schrader. Benson was very close. Wow. 3,575 to 3,576. Man, that's a costly point there. See, again, full season championship, and it determines whether or not you even are showing up to the banquet or not. So there you go. Johnny Benson. Yeah, there's another throwback. All right. We'll do a couple more here, and then we'll wrap up here for tonight. What year did Capitol Hill host a, quote, salute to women in motorsports? So we're looking for a year. What year did Capitol Hill host a salute to women in motorsports? Capitol Hill that was always one that confused me as a kid. I always pictured that Capitol Hill was literally a hill. Like it was just like a place that people met. And it was like a big grassy hill, like in a park somewhere. I never thought it was being like a euphemism for government buildings or anything. Because I remember going to Washington, D.C., and then everything's flat. I'm like, where's Capitol Hill? It's like, oh, it's this. It's like over. It's like, it's here. It's like, okay, well, where's, I thought there was a hill they just hung out at or something. I don't know. These are the things you hear. What year did Capitol Hill host a salute to women in motorsports is the question. Kyle Busch has an announcement tomorrow, does he? I don't know. We'll see. 94, 2000, 91, 93, 96, 2189, 95, 96 to 02 Pontiacs. Yeah, I still like 91 to 95 better, but I can see why people like 96 to 02. Then 03 I think was even kind of crazier. Washington Monuments on a hill, kind of, yeah, there's that. But is that Capitol Hill? Like, that's the thing. I always like Capitol is like just, euphemism for the Capitol building or just all of It's always like, oh, this bill was passed on Capitol Hill. It's like, wow, they had to climb all that way up there to pass that bill. Like, I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, what year did Capitol Hill host a salute to women in motorsports? The answer is 1997. 97 is the answer. 93, 95. I don't think anybody guessed that. Did anybody guess 97? 97 is a lost battle. 14 points between first and second. It seemed really close. I was looking up clips for that for the Cartoon Network thing, and it looked like just a tremendous battle there. 97. I don't think anybody got it. Yeah, wow, really challenging. It's 97, so second term Clinton. All right. Let's see. Not that one. That one's a little too easy. Alrighty. Oh, this is a good one. This is a good one. Next question here. Who was the first Winston Cup driver to win over $500,000 in a season? Who was the first Winston Cup driver to win over $500,000 in a season? That is the question. All right. Kyle Larson, Matt Weaver tweeting this a half an hour ago. I think if we would still have the 2021 car, I would have about 50 Cup wins right now. I think switching to this car has limited us from winning, says Kyle Larson. Limited us from winning, rather. All right. Let's see. Who was the first Winston Cup driver to win over $500,000 in a season? I guess is for Buddy Baker and Darrell Waltrip and Bill Elliott and Richard Petty and Darrell Waltrip and Bobby Allison and Petty. They flew on Piedmont Airlines. I didn't even think they still existed, Austin. There you go. Yeah, I don't really follow March Madness, so I couldn't tell you one way or the other. The first Winston Cup driver to earn over $500,000 in a season. The answer is Cale Yarborough, Beanboy89, coming in clutch. That's the answer. Beanboy89 got it. I don't think anybody else did. That was another tricky one. Cale Yarborough is the correct answer. All right, we'll do one more here, and then we'll wrap up here. Let's see. Yeah, maybe not there. That was a little too easy, too. Okay, here we go. This is a good one. All right, last question for the evening, folks. Here we go. Who was the first NASCAR driver to make the field for an Indy 500 race? Who was the first NASCAR driver to make the field for an Indy 500 race? That sounds like a product of stagflation. Yeah, there you go. $500,000 for Cale Yarborough. Over $500,000. Oh, Piedmont's a subsidiary of American. Okay, I didn't know that. There we go. Cool. Learned something new today. Alrighty. Who was the first NASCAR driver to make the field for an Indy 500 race? To make the field for it, which of course is a major distinction. Not just attempt it. The first NASCAR driver to make the field for an Indy 500 race. Alrighty. How long was that? 321. That was more like 20 minutes. I apologize for starting a little bit later. I was just kind of checking my feed here. I was trying to sync up my earbuds with my device here so I don't have to wear these headphones. But it wasn't entirely successful. But that'll probably be something else I'll tinker with for sure. It's a little clunky here, but that's all good. We'll figure things out. Who was the first NASCAR driver to make the field for an Indy 500 race? And the answer is Marshall Teague. Marshall Teague is the correct answer. I think what Curtis would drop for is Curtis Turner. You got Curtis Turner, Leroy Yarborough, Tim Richmond, Kyle Larson, Donnie Allison, Jim Roper, Curtis Turner, Andretti, Donnie Allison. Those of you who picked Donnie Allison, that sounded right. It sounded like it was one of the Allisons. But it says here Marshall Teague is the correct answer. Marshall Teague. I don't think anybody got that. Wow, is this one stumped everybody? Herb Thomas, Jim Roper, getting closer. Yeah, Marshall Teague. I guess maybe, is it like, I wonder if that's thinking about like a driver that started in IndyCar and then got into NASCAR. Maybe that's the distinction versus somebody that made a name in NASCAR and then went to IndyCar. It seems like those would have different answers. Let me take a look. Yeah, Teague. Okay, back when, I mean, if the Cup Series, of course, doesn't go as far back as the Indy 500, so it certainly is possible. First Cup start 1949. Oh no, I'm seeing it here. Let's see. It's like the 53 Indy 500s. Yeah, that would be after he was a Cup star. So it'd be about 4 years later. Has it on the Formula One and stats here too. Yeah, 53 and 57 in the Offenhauser. The Offie. There we go. Huh. Started 22nd and finished 18th. So there you go. He died in 59. Yes, he had I think NASCAR Man did a video on that that I narrated. I believe it was on the was he on Teague specifically, or it was like his accident I know that came up. I remember them talking about the Sumar special and all that deal there. Yeah, well, there you go. So yeah, 1953, it says here, was his first start in the Indy 500. So 4 years after his Cup debut. Oh, goodness, a new NASCAR video. Fantastic. Let's see. Alrighty. Okay, cool. Well, there we go. So, tell you what. So, that will do it for the show this evening. Wow, I tried to get through that without a cough. I felt it coming. I'm like, okay, can I bust through this? No, that's not going to work. Alrighty. So, that'll do it here for the show this evening. I thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Congratulations to Kyle Larson for winning 2 of the 3 races this weekend, and Justin Allgaier for his win on Saturday. The article on Carson Hocevar will be coming up a little bit later tonight. A Cup Series article, 4th last place run for Hocevar there, and his first of the season. First since the 2024 Daytona 500, when he was last in that race there as well. So that'll be the subject coming up. In the meantime, my Twitter feed is @LastCarOnBrock. My Patreon feed is patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock. Feel free to check out the other videos on this channel, including the upcoming Cartoon Network video. More news on the Cartoon Network Wacky Racing project through the end of this month, the first part of next month here as well. We'll be following up on that. Our next show is going to be next Sunday after the Cup Series action in Martinsville. We'll cover another triple header of action between the Truck Series, Xfinity Series, and the Cup Series. Entry list article coming up this Friday. We also have IndyCar coverage from our William Saki coming up this week, starting with the St. Petersburg article tomorrow. And so lots to look forward to. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.